Hello and welcome from Merrick's in St. Philip. I'm Sherwood McCaskey welcoming you to program number 6 in the current series of
Today is a funny night.
In last week's program, we discussed the activities associated with the riots, those activities that occurred in our capital city, Bridgetown, and in the parish of St. John, in neighborhoods such as Venture and Martins Bay. Sylvia Goodridge, then a little girl, recalled her experiences of those activities. Now, during our research for this program, the folks from the National Cultural Foundation came across yet another interesting Barbadian lady who, in her own style, perhaps I could say, she regaled us with her memories of the riots. Yes, I said regale because you will find her stories to be rather interesting.
There was a very excited feeling around the place. And I like that because I live in the country, in a little pocket in the country where nothing happened. So this excited feeling really, I like that because that excited me. It was nice. My father was always going to meetings and talking to people. As my mother said, going and talking to the men like he's their father. And the morning of the Reds, I loved the Reds. I really enjoyed them. I was like 3 years old. I was very tall for my age, which helped a lot. When I went to join the rioters, because it looked nice to me, like they were having fun, so I ran across the street to the shop and thought I would go in and get some sweets. Because my mother didn't let us eat sweets. She said they would rot our teeth. That didn't make sense to me, because I didn't see how a little sweetie could rot your teeth. But of course, at least she didn't argue with my mother. So while she wasn't looking, I ran out the side and ran in the shop and tiptoed and reached the sweetie jars. They were big glass jars. I pushed and I pulled, so one came crashing down and broke, of course. And the people were barefooted. They started swinging lashes at me. So I just gathered up a few sweets and ran out of the shop and home. My mother saw me coming across the street. So when I came home, she held me, she wrung my hair, she slapped me, and she took my sweeties that I had worked so hard for and threw them in the garbage pail. And that hurt me, it really did, more than the earring and the slap. I lost my sweeties and I was so sad.
Well, while little Cynthia was sad about losing her sweets, that sadness did not prevent her from being all caught up in the great excitement that had descended upon her normally quiet community of Merrick's here in St. Philip.
You could see the people coming down the street. There was what we call the front road, and then there was a little road that led into Merrick's. And they were coming down looking very determined and looking what we call like dread. And they had crocus bags and flour bags in their hand and sticks. And some people had hoes. And they were grumbling to themselves. And my mother was sitting by the door saying, and apparently there was a rumor that the people were going to kill and beat and kill whoever was on black. And my mother was kind of red. And whoever was rich, they were going to. And my father was a teacher. And we lived in a very poor community. We were poor too, but less poor than the other people. So my mother thought that we were threatened. And of course, she had children. That was what happened. So my father had an old piece of gun. So my mother went and took up the gun, got a piece of rag and some linseed oil, and she sitting down cleaning this gun and muttering, kill people. Lord, I know you will help me to kill the first man that look in here to trouble my children. So she says, now cleaning the gun and praying for the Lord to help her to kill whoever look in there.
Well, while Mommy is at home with the gun in her hand, the entourage of rioters is making its way towards the shop. The excitement is building for little Cynthia.
The people came in, and the shopkeeper is looking out. He used to smile a lot. He's kind of a half Indianish man. And, but he was very nice. He used to give people a lot of things. Biscuits were like 12%. Not these square biscuits, a little round hard biscuits that you used to cook. And he's looking out, and the people are coming in the shop, and he's opening all the doors, even those that had been stuck when they painted them. And then they opened them afterwards, so the doors were stuck. So he opened all of them. So the people came in, and they're picking up things and putting in their bags. And I had a big fat woman named Dolly, a big fat red woman. And she took her dress and knotted the skirt in front and made a bag to put things in. So people are picking up things and shopping. But I don't see anybody weighing, and I don't see anybody paying. But it looked like fun, so I thought I would join. So off I went to join and get my sweets, which earned me a slap and a ring ear, and no sweets.
Now, there's clearly something about those sweets. Now, this is the countryside, a rural St. Philip. These modern-day houses were not here. A then 3-year-old girl caught up in the euphoria of this all. Now, just when you thought that she had seen enough, her excitement heightens.
Policemen came. We heard sirens, and people started scrambling to get out of the shop. They're scrambling to get out, and Dolly, in her panic, let go of the dress, and everything fell out. And she was really fast. She couldn't come. You know, they had these doors that were half doors. You could open one half. If one half was open, she had to come in sideways. She was really fat. And the people had opened the flaps. And she was so panicky, poor thing. She tried to get through the flaps, and obviously it wasn't possible. So people had to stop and laugh. And then somebody held her and pushed her through a door. And the policemen came on their horses. It looked to me they were trying to ride down the people. And they were letting off their guns. I think they were letting them off in the air, but of course it panicked everybody.
Well, that excitement moves from the shop and the road and proceeded to her backyard.
I saw a man run from the shop and run into our backyard and go into our outside toilet. So I went and told my mother that there was a man hiding in our outside toilet. So this young policeman came. And he said, "Mrs. Aline, have you seen any of these miscreants around? Have any of them come to your house?" My mother said, "No, I have seen nobody come into my place." And the helper had been just roasted a corn for me. So I went and got my roast corn. I asked him if he wanted a piece. He said, "No, he can't have it. He only used to wear these white tunics." He said it would dirty up his tunic. I was glad I wanted my whole corn. But my mother sent me to get some lemonade for him, so I got it and he brought it. And he said, he thanked my mother and said he hopes he meets this level of cooperation everywhere that he goes. But I look at my mother, I said, "This is my mother, which I must not lie," and she's lying. So I said, "But Mommy," so she put her hand across my mouth. So this child is so traumatized with what's going on here this morning, and she doesn't even know what she's saying. But I hadn't said anything. So after the police, I said, "But Mommy, I told you." She said, "Yes, you told me something. Well, I have seen no one." So that is what I told the policeman. I thought to myself, grown-ups, they can lie in a very sly way. I didn't like grown-ups. I thought they were not trustworthy. They're always looking for a way to find you wrong. Of course, you know when you're little, you think you're big. I thought I was big, and I thought I had more sense than all of them.
Now, quite a lot is happening at this time. I'm sure perhaps you're beginning to wonder, what is happening to the gentleman who was hiding in her outhouse?
The young man went along, and then my mother came. She had a plate. The plate had on rice, and it had on pumpkin. It had saltfish, a couple of slices of tomato. And she gave it with a fork and a napkin. She said, "Cynthia, please go and give this to anybody who's not here." So I went out to the outside toilet, and the fella up in the corner, drawn up, shivering like a leaf. And we used to grow cotton. You're not supposed to store the cotton stalks, but they used to burn very well. Our house was fairly high, so my father used to gather the cotton, dry the stalks, and put them under the house. My brother and I used to go under there and play. Because when you're under there, nobody could see you. And you had a time to yourself. You weren't bothered when you were there, because you weren't under anybody's feet, because you weren't visible. So I told him, "Come on, I'm going to show you where to eat." So I took him under there and let him eat. And I had gone and asked the helper to make a cup of ginger tea for him. So I brought it to him and told him drink the tea first to break the air out of his stomach. And he did, because he drank it, the biggest belch I had ever heard. And then he ate the rice and so on like he had never eaten for a year. So when he finished, he said, tell your mother thanks very much. He said, I will pass by now and then to visit. I'm going up on the Sea Rocks. So I went back, I told Mommy that he had said thanks very much and he would come back to visit us now and then. My mother said, who? What? Come back? I thought, oh dear, grown-ups.
And yes, you are absolutely correct. All of this is occurring on the day of the riot in 1937. Now here's an interesting experience that occurred at another shop.
Anyway, Gertz had a big shop in Six Roads. And she had one of the first filling stations in Barbados. And she had cars which she used to rent out. Her sons used to drive the cars, Bertram and Merton. They used to drive like demons, and I loved it when they came to take me for a drive. I loved the driving fast. It never occurred to me that it was dangerous. You know, when you're a child, those things don't occur to you. I just knew it was fun to feel the breeze all over my face. Anyways, her son was sitting in the shop against the door. And he was leaning against the door. And his mother said, Martin, get up and come from there, come over here by me. He said, but why, Mommy? Why? I'm comfortable here. He said, get up and come right now. So he argued a little bit. He got up and he went over by her. As soon as he got up, a bullet came through the door. He said, you see what I tell you? You must always listen to your mother.
We have, therefore, riots in the country, and these riots are finally brought to an end around August 3rd. Okay? They're finally brought to an end around that period, and at the end of it all, some 14 people were killed and 47, in excess of 47 wounded.
Well, as was discussed in the series, the riots occurred all across the island. You have just heard what was happening here in Merrick, St. Philip. Meanwhile, what is happening in the city?
Now, as we know, the instructions of the police were not complied with by your people who were intending to riot. And there are stories, the number of persons, all black by the way, who were shot and killed. That number was initially given as 14, with hundreds wounded.
The victims, 14 dead, they said 27 wounded, over 400 put before the courts and tried, etc.
And I remembered that Robert Morris, had done a piece, I think, which was produced, I think, in the Sun, where, in fact, he had raised questions about whether it was accurate to say that 14 died. He was the first person, I think, certainly in recent times, to take a look at the so-called death toll.
If 14 would have been given as a public document, anybody could go and read the 14 that the government would have put out there. Now, it seemed to me as a researcher, if 14 died and reported, 27 wounded, certainly some of those wounded might have died. So where do I get that information? The first thing I went to would have been District A, B, C, D, and E, because when you die, you have to report it. There must be a death certificate, which is different from when you're buried now, where there's a burial certificate. So I went to all of those reports in the archives. And when I saw a report saying that the person died as a result of a wound in the 37 disturbances, I added on the number. No magic about it. And once that number was not one on the official list, I added the number. And somebody will have to go and check and say I didn't do that, or that I didn't put the correct information. So I wasn't pulling some name out of the ear. And those are the names I got. I have them here, and I will read them into the records again so people who may know who they are. There was one that I put aside in the sense that the name that was given officially was Rimple Kettle. R-I-M-P-L-E-K-E-T-T-L-E. Now that sounds like a nickname, a typical Bajan nickname. I can't believe that anybody was given a Christian name as Rimple and had a surname Kettle. I never heard anybody with that name Kettle. So I put that down as one that I would have to investigate further. But it's very difficult in that passage of time to find out who had a nickname and who it really was. But I put it aside. So the others are Sinclair Gittins, Elsie Payne, Frank Springer, Nathaniel Brown, Ralph Hamblin, Adriana Rock, Aubrey Eversley, DeCosta O'Neill, Darley Rollock, Sinclair Branch, Wilbert Graham, Sean Lashley, Livingstone Burrows, Colburn Allen, James Smith, Othniel Murray, Urt Williams, Carlisle Graves, Joseph Belgrave, Lionel Burnett, Arthur Babb. As a historian too, I could venture almost to give some idea the parishes that these people came from. I'm not going to do it now because some names you know. When it's a northern name, if you hear Babb and you hear Belgrove, etc., these people came from the north, basically. Because you know the plantation structure, and people were named after the plantation structure, where you came from, etc. O'Neill, again St. Peter, basically, that's where the O'Neills had their plantations, etc. I didn't do that analysis at that time, but I could have followed through with that, because I was just reporting at the time on the research I had done. I didn't want to follow through. I haven't been able, say, to go back to those same records, because once they were, once the death certificate was issued, it would also say how old the person was. You can then make an estimate of when the person was born. You can go and do a look then for the birth certificate, which will tell you the father and the mother, and so on. So it's that kind of work that could have been done if I want to pursue who these people are and to find out if they still have relatives around, etc. That's interesting research for me, quite frankly.
Now, what I also said to him, that I think it would be very useful in terms of public education, if in fact he did another piece where he looked into all the circumstances of all of those fatalities, okay? Because nobody has done it. I mean, he was the first person, I think, certainly in recent times, to take a look at the so-called death toll. Okay, so that, all right. And as he was saying to me, and you know, it is obvious that 14 couldn't be the final figure. A lot of people got wounded, you know, usually got gunshot wounds, and of course with our abysmal hospital care and just medical facilities at the time, most of those would have died. Okay, so that therefore, to say that 14 got killed might really mean that got killed on the spot. But a lot of those 40 or 50 or so-called wounded, a lot of them most likely died soon afterwards. So consequently, one should be relooking at this thing. So this is what I was encouraging to do, so that I can't really contribute a great deal, because I think that investigation should be done. And I think that Bobby is well placed, because he obviously has an interest, he is well placed to do it.
I don't know if I'll get back to it at this time, but again, there are younger people out there taking on the work who may want to do that. But I saw these people as significant. They must not be statistics. These people died. A lot of people who lead these revolutions and make it seem such a glorious thing don't get near the bullet. It's all right to be planning rebellions and talking about them and fomenting them, but those people are in the safety of their home while those guys are getting killed, which is another discussion we can probably look at in terms of what I felt happened. Where were these killed? They were killed all over the place, you know. Some were killed as they were digging yams and potatoes. Some of them were shot. Sometimes it was not necessarily that some good marksman looked and said, let me take him out. Some of the policemen couldn't shoot. A lot of them had not been trained. And they had these 303s that they had never fired at all in their lives. And sometimes they're aiming at your hand and end up with a bullet in your belly. We need to understand what's happening. We are not talking about policemen who were regularly using that kind of activity, putting down riots, etc. So you had to be careful. Sometimes the intention of what happened was not what they set out to do. And so some of these people who died a horrible death days before they died and so on. They had a wound, and you know, and that is the pain that we have to look at. So some of them were out there doing what would have been considered unlawful act, and they were shot doing that. And then some of them were just in the crowd in Bridgetown, etc., and the police behind them, etc., and you're shooting and somebody just, some woman, sometimes you will read it in the newspaper, some woman just fell there.
For example, a hawker by the name of Adina Rock from Britain's St. Michael was walking with her tray of vegetables on her head, and she's coming up Swan Street, and she is shot by the security forces. She's shot, and she's shot dead right there in Swan Street. She was not a rioter. Probably had no intention to riot. And she was shot.
I've heard people say that people got shot for standing up. If you run, you're rioting. If you stand up, you're challenging the authority. That was the sort of logic by some of the security forces.
It was a tragic thing, and I felt that we have done nothing about these. So when Mr. Wilson decided that he would put up that monument, I thought that was such a fantastic thing. He spoke to me and I gave him the names, all that I had, the information that he had and so on. I think he stuck mainly with the official 14 from advice from whoever, etc., because we never had any further discussion. But I know he could verify each one of these names, as I said, from two sources. One is the source that was put up with the police, and secondly, my further research into death certificates, and being very careful that if the death certificate said died as a result of trauma from a bullet wound or something in the 37 disturbances, I said, that is one of the persons I need to get. And I put that in there. All right, but as I said, it must have been a very shocking thing. I asked people to read George Lamming in The Cat of My Skin. I read that maybe about 15 times. Read it about 2 weeks ago. And the older you get and you read it, the better you understand it. Very complex novel. And George is a very, very complex writer. And, you know, George is a little boy, Carrington Village, etc., in the heart of things, going down with the boys and see what's happening, etc. It's a very wonderful way to look at history through a different lens, the lens of the creative worker, etc.
Many years later, Cynthia Wilson crystallized her experiences of the 1937 riots.
I had the most memorable day of my life. I had a grown-up friend to boot. She didn't come back to visit. I don't know how I was surprised at that and felt let down, because I knew that grown-ups very rarely did what they said they would. Still, somehow I thought he was different. He seemed so sincere. I enjoyed the riots. They were perhaps the most exciting time.
And then Hope, Colin Hope, I think he is, Hope wrote something about the riots too. And I really feel that, you see those two books? Should be compulsory reading for Barbadians, and especially for our 5th and 6th form students, tell the truth. I would make them buy Colin Hope's book about the riots and George Lamming in The Cat of My Skin. But that's my diversion. It is what I believe in. I get a chance to say it with my friends here. So those were two areas that I was really concerned about, making sure that individuals, that this was put in a public place, not in the archives, but in a newspaper article, that people can go and see who these persons were. And that, again, further research can be done, still possible, in terms of who these people were and what were the circumstances that led to their death.
And that's it. Do join us again next week at the same time as we look at the aftermath of this 1937 riot. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time. This has been...
Today is a funny night.